days you work, one whole day to play. Come on, everybody, wear your roller skates today. It's Saturday, 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 it's Saturday, Saturday, it's Saturday, Saturday, it's Saturday,
Saturday with Renee.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Black Liberation Media and episode 138 of uninterrupted, consecutive, and undefeated episodes of Saturdays with Renee, featuring Renee Johnston. I'm Jared Ball. Please like, share, subscribe, support the Patreon however you would like. We are live. So Renee,
I know it's been a minute since we've been live. It's been it's been like weeks.
Oh man, Chitty Maka said, I'm going to be commuting and miss the chat, but I started reading and I'm excited for the convo. Good, because there's already an overlap with your three-step propaganda model.
I know, and I haven't watched your conversation with Chitty yet, and you still haven't read Palo Alto, which we have to circle back to because that's.
Will that be the hook for Chitty to join us here? Is that what? All right. I'm on it. I'm on it.
It's mind-boggling the amount that went through Palo Alto. There would be no. Until I read that book, I had no understanding of it. Like zero understanding of it. So,
well, very oversimplifying, because this is there is an immediate overlap to this amazing book we'll be discussing momentarily. But Chitty Maka basically has identified that this three-step process of the producers of propaganda, those who then take that and obscure that propaganda, redistributing it, confusing the use the propaganda to obscure the reality and impose the mythology. And then the third step is the imposed acceptance that the myth is real. So there's this, and I have the page identified where there's a literal overlap between those two, but there's a broader one between and what Chitty Maka, I'm really oversimplifying, but that's
that's why I need to read it. And she also, we've been having this conversation. I'm reminded now of it. So Art's saying definitely need a BLM book club in the near future with all these great recommendations. And so y'all know I read constantly. So like I was waiting to pre-order the Audible version of this, so that because me and my mom are going to listen to the Audible version of From the Clinics to the Streets together. And then I came across Lara's first book that she wrote with Stephen, talking about the psychoanalysis in Palestine. So I'm not listening to that because, one, it's Lara's voice, and like, why not? But also because it's such a fascinating, the whole thing is so fascinating to me as someone with a degree in psychology, because I don't almost ever talk about the fact that I actually have a degree in psychology. And part of the reason that I went into school counseling is because of my degree in psychology. And so there's so
well, my oldest is headed towards that degree. And so I already gave her a copy of Lara's new book. And then just for the symmetry of it, I just went ahead, and though she's not going in this particular direction, I gave a copy also to my youngest and said, you just on GP read it. My oldest, I said, you must, and there will be, because if you're going into this field, you can't not, you know what I'm saying? You can't. Yeah. And then, but my youngest, it'll just be strongly encouraged and regularly brought up and shamed if not done. But as Lara, I think, points out in the book, it is beyond any specific field or specific subjective application.
And she's gonna say it when she comes out. She wrote it for the comrades. She's gonna say
That's it.
I guarantee she's gonna say it, and it's legit. It's legit. Well, I feel like we should just.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I'm reading the private chat. Absolutely, yeah. Oh, I exploit all my relationships. Take advantage of everything. If I have access to somebody, you know what? Let me absolutely, hit them up. So absolutely. Anyway, yeah. But there was something I wanted to say else in the preamble, but I lost it, and so unless
if it comes back to you, you can just say it.
Just bring it up.
That's all. That's all.
So, but anyway, everybody like, share, subscribe, and then make sure you get this great book. And then let's just bring our guests to the stage and get busy, because the general vibe of the book is a get busy book, which I love. So welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I love listening. I could just listen to you both talk to each other all day. So,
my sister, how are you?
I'm good. I want to shout out to my Steven, my partner, for these awesome fucking earrings. Check them out.
He gives good gifts, man. He's a good gift giver.
He is.
It's nice. It's nice when my husband is also a good gift giver. So this is something I'm familiar with. I don't know if Jared's a good gift. I don't know if Jared's wife would say that he's a good gift giver.
She would not. And in fact, years ago, I was basically barred from buying any more.
No.
Yeah, it was just so bad that everybody there was an intervention. And so now my daughters help, my sister-in-law helps, everybody helps to we got to know where we struggle, and then get the community to help us out every once in a while. So I recognized, and adjusted.
That's hysterical. That is hysterical. Well, so I'm glad that I'm not on that side of things. So, it's nice. I don't even know how to explain it. There's so many things that happen all the time. And Lara, we've had so many conversations about all the things, but having someone who is supportive, who can take care of things, who I can rely on to get the stuff done, it's it's helpful. It's very, very helpful.
Yeah, now that's where I'm at. Something needs doing, somebody needs somebody to be there. I show up, I'm on point, salute, ready to go. It's the send him off on his own to get me again. No.
That's hysterical. Oh man. Well, I can't help you with that one. I got nothing. I got nothing there. But in typical fashion, as folks should be used to by now, we allow our guests to introduce themselves. And although you're definitely not new to the show, Lara, and just in case no one has ever seen you before, which would be crazy at this point, but we'll roll with it. Please let the folks know who you are, where you're at, where you're from, why you do the things, and then we can talk about the book.
Oof. Well, hi, everybody. I love your chat, and I love the folks who show up. So I just love being with you all. And the show, I watch it religiously as well. So I'm in good company with everybody in the chat. My name is Lara. I'm a Lebanese Arab, which feels very important. And I always say this. I say this because our liberation in the region runs through Jerusalem and all the fuckery that makes us think that somehow Lebanon and Palestine are separate from the struggle. They're not. And that's why I always lead with that, right? So Lebanese-ness is part of Arabness. And I think that's really important. I'm a clinical psychologist. This is what drew me to the urgency to write this book, is to liberate all the knowledge that
I have amassed over 15 plus years of practice, and saying it doesn't belong behind a clinic door like it's meant to, and sort of sequestered away from folks and gate kept. I'm also the host of the Psychic Militancy podcast, and I just try to keep having these conversations, both with comrades like Renee, Sam, and I. Shout out to Sam, who we have these conversations in our chat, but then also publicly continuously have these conversations so that we're not alone in them, and we're, practicing what it means to not only just create knowledge, but also like reclaim a lot of the shit that's stolen from us on purpose. And I think that's where I'm at this morning. I'm just excited to get into it. And I feel really humbled and really grateful to you both. How the care you've taken to read the book, the excitement. Shout out to folks who have tagged me on Instagram, shown me when their book gets there. It means so much to me, really. It's like it doesn't get old, and it doesn't feel like, oh, okay, that's just it. I feel incredibly grateful and really humbled, and just so happy to be in like this large network of folks and comrades who defy geographical space and just are like, hey, let's do the thing. Let's find all the ways that we can fight fascism and kind of come together against these forces, which for me is the most important thing. Like one of many fucking tools against oppression and in this long struggle ahead. So thanks for having me on to talk about it.
And I gotta say, like, shout out to Jay, because
yay, hey Jay,
because literally that's how I found you, was watching Millennials, and you would, you're on there regularly, and so I was always like, she's so dope. And then he got me on that. It was the fundraising thing, and y'all, I did like a for real, like fangirl, like sent Lara an email on the side, like, I hope this isn't weird, but I just think you're so cool.
And if I can just say that also, just as a note to future authors, as an example of many that Lara provides in this book, she gives a nice, almost paragraph shout out to Jared for their prior engagement and work and support. So just remember that, future authors. Don't forget the folks that you build with a little bit along the way.
That's right. That's right. We can't do this.
A lot of forgetting out there.
That's a bit petty. That's
so true. It's
damn right.
True. It's fucking true, though. It's true. No,
but it is true. Acknowledgements are petty. Like, we have to be real. Like, we know who we're saying we're shouting out and who we're not. We know who gets left out. God damn it! No, I'm just playing. No, but it's beautiful. It was nice to see. So right on, yeah. And it was well deserved, of course, because I encountered a lot of your work that way as well. Yeah. That's
right. Yeah. I mean, Jay brought a lot of us together, and that's Renee. Renee sent me an email, and she then later told me she was sheepish about it. Meanwhile, I was fangirling, and I was like, I can't believe Renee's writing me. So
exactly, Stephen.
That's funny.
You better not leave me out.
So let's talk about the book, because I really need people to read the book. Like, y'all, seriously, y'all need to read the book. And there's so much. And when I was reading it the first time, I was sending notes to Lara, like, oh, this part, oh, this thing you just said. Because throughout my reading of this, I just felt buoyed, is probably the best way to put it, right? Like, I was like, yeah, like, this is the stuff that people need to understand so that they can hold on to whatever level of preservation they have left, to remind them that everything that is telling you not to fight is telling you not to fight, so you don't fight, right? It's like a never-ending struggle. And so can we talk first? Maybe let's talk first about why you decided to put this in writing, because I know this was, there was a lot you were trying to decide on the podcast, which was something that I'm glad you decided to do, and you had already written the book and you were traveling, and then there was all the stuff happening with your old job. Like there was 80,000 things happening at once. So what made you decide, I'm going to sit down and do this thing?
Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time coming, and the book, it's a different book than it was originally in my mind. And those of us who write, I think that's not a new thing. You think you're going to write one version of something, and then hopefully if you're engaged in the world and, and you're paying attention to the things that are happening and you're moving with the world, that something else emerges, right? I think it's really dangerous when you're just like, I'm going to write this thing and that's the thing that comes out. It's just like that there's something that you're not doing in the process. But I will say that this is an entirely different book. And that is why I gave a shout out to Jay from Millennials Are Killing Capitalism, because I think, it's starting to have those conversations after Tawfan al-Aqsa. And certainly these are conversations that I've been having at home with Stephen and doing that and just really processing everything that was happening in the world and sort of consolidating what does it mean to have a discipline that helps you read, process, and then also there's this massive global crisis that's happening, but having access and the privilege of hearing people's stories, both on the couch, so to speak, as a clinician. I practice, I have a private practice, and speaking with students who would invite me into their organizing spaces, talking with comrades, having these conversations, public conversations, is this idea of like, what is happening to our mind? It's not like I hadn't thought about that before, but the level, the magnitude of violence that we were seeing and experiencing in real time, and the ways in which people would say to me, this is the part that sort of got me thinking about psychic intrusions, is that, we often think about like oppression happens and then there's an after effect, and that after effect is mental health issues, that we end up feeling a certain way after the fact because. And as we started to have these conversations after Tawfan al-Aqsa, I realized this was not a byproduct. So not an after effect. This was like our psyche was the actual target. That was the primary goal, was to intrude on our mind. And I didn't have to look, obviously people have done this work before, right? Our comrade Ori sort of tracks this in Tip of the Spear, and the ways that sort of incarcerated or captured folks, as he talks about, are, primary targets for this, have been the target of experiments around this. That's why political prisoners factor so heavily in the book, because they've taught us this for a very long time. So it wasn't necessarily, oh, I'm discovering something new. It was sort of saying, can I remain attentive to this element of it? And that's the thing that surprised me, is that despite this knowledge, despite knowing all of this, it was so hard to hold on to. And that was like, oh, there's something larger happening here that actually makes it difficult for us to retain connection, to complicate our ability to remain tethered to the knowledge that oppressive systems and power actually infiltrate our psychic province and actually make us forget things. There's nothing about that that's accidental or a byproduct. This is an actual target of it. So that's why I felt an urgency, and I say this despite everything that was happening in my world. I sort of was kind of delaying, getting this. And of course I was writing here and there and thinking and reading, and you do all of that in preparation for a book, but really the urgency, the push to get this version of the book on paper did come after Tawfan al-Aqsa, and the ways that I struggled alongside comrades and organizers and people and students to understand what was happening at a larger level and to remain connected to material reality. And more importantly for me, remain connected to our struggle, to our commitments, to our political commitments. Because that was the other thing. I was like, this isn't just it's not just about, making us feel a certain way. It's actually about disconnecting us, derailing us, dismembering us as, as people in the struggle, and making us actually think that there's nothing left to be done. And that was the piece I was like, fuck no, I can't have this happen. And, you know, I had an awesome question. I was in London and in the UK doing some book launches, and somebody said to me, I felt like you were writing to yourself as well. And I hadn't thought about that like consciously, but like, yeah, if we're having to repeat this, of course I was also doing that for myself. Like this book became then a vessel of clarity around all the things that I needed to retain, connection to militant, connection to clarity, all the things that I want us to be able to mobilize. Yeah, I suppose I was also speaking to myself in this. So there are many layers.
And also in a way reminding yourself, because for as strong as I know you are, and as any person, like you still have moments when you're like, wait, what just happened? Right? So it also, I'm sure, will serve as a reminder to yourself, like, don't forget these words that you spoke, right? So it's
why I opened with what I opened, like the introduction. I opened with that as a moment where we have the potential to forget.
Yeah,
you know?
And that's what the system wants also. Like it wants you to temporarily like not think about the thing that was just so hardly like wired into your brain, right? Like, and that's why the news media cycle is the way it is. That's why there's always a new thing to watch and to do. That's why social media is so overwhelming. Like it's all to make you forget about the thing that you're supposed to keep in the forefront as all of these things are transpiring around and before you. So folks who have not read it, and spoilers, but it's still going to be worth reading, I promise you. So the intro starts with this experience that you had during a panel where Zionists walked in acting as they do. And it's something I've heard you talk about, like the decision, and you even write about the decision to start with this story, right? Like it's part of the book, the explanation for it. But can you talk about why you chose that moment? I mean, I know why, but I think the people need to know why.
Yes, and I'm seeing Jared's. I want to hear what Jared's thinking too.
The way I was going to describe, forgive me, but the way I was going to describe was it's an incredibly gripping introduction, and I was it immediately. I've kind of just been like I've been bouncing for honestly for both reasons, because I feel a vibe with the book, and I've been reading, literally sitting just bouncing. And then because also I'm like, it does make me want to swing. It makes me, I was sitting there, and then it took me until page 89 to get that proverbial drop. That's how I took it, at least. Because that introductory scene, and I'm happy to, I want you to come back or us to come back and said it. But it was so gripping, and I felt for 89 pages I was just being just, and then on page 89, and forget, I'm going to mispronounce the name, but you said through speaking about anger, which can follow a similar logic, Francois Vergès walks us through the logic of this intentional derailment, reminding us of the pacification of our militant past contributes to our domination in the present, and power exploits this pacifying narrative to teach contemporary movements a lesson. Norms of respectability are enacted to stifle anger, to make anger dishonorable and fraudulent.
That's right.
And that was for me the drop where now I'm like, now I'm the bouncing, like this is what I'm talking about. So thank you very much. It was beautifully done, and the whole book is dope, and it's just endless bars, and I can't even find the button. But
thank you. Thank you, my friend. Yeah. Thank you. No, it means a lot to me, and I think it means a lot to me because there's a way in which you know, I talk about affect states in this book, and this gets to the question, Renee. This, I promise you, I'm responding to the question. Is like, affect is mobilized by power in very specific ways at very specific moments. And this opening scene for me was so important. And I went back and forth about, do I do it? Partially because like, I struggle with the autoethnography is really important. I believe that, particularly for voices that have historically, you know, not been represented. And also you always, I'll speak for myself. The struggle is, how do I do this in a way that doesn't individualize, that doesn't repeat the actual thing? Like, yes, it's about me because I was being targeted, but it's also not about me, this, right? It's a larger structural piece. So that's the struggle of deciding what to do that. But Jared, you sharing that is so important to me, because I want us to be able to connect to that affect in a way that is disciplined out of us on purpose. I want us to take in the magnitude of what it actually means and not have us become numb to the fact that, like, I wanted us to work against normalization. That's the point. Psychic intrusions normalize certain things. They make them part of an regular or normative topography of the world. A Zionist walking into a conference room, we're invited to think about that. Oh, well, it just happens. Yeah, he just happened to walk in. And like, now we might say no, because we know these motherfuckers from online. We know them. We know their type. We know the sadistic pleasures they have in creating scenes. We know this is part of a larger structure. But that scene was from 2017. And the video I have of everybody in the room were people who had no knowledge that somebody like him could exist in the world. Which means those of us in the room that already were familiar with that type were the ones who were holding this. And that's the piece that, like, I both wanted us to sort of get in contact with affect, and the book is an in vivo exercise of that. It's us together as readers sort of feeling into things and recognizing what the struggle of that affect is and militantly holding on to it. I say that in the introduction too. It's a invitation to sit with all the shit that comes up that otherwise we are expected to let go of as a precondition to entering humanity. And I'm just like, fuck that shit. That's the channel through which we become disciplined out of the fire that we need for this struggle. So I was like, what is an example of this that also for me, I didn't know it then, but if I look now, this many years later, I can see it as a pivotal moment in which this starts to consolidate. I didn't have the language of psychic militancy that emerged out of conversation with Jared, with my partner, Stephen, with sort of other comrades around like that actual concept. But over the years, and I think many of us probably who have been engaged in this work and this struggle and in the world, have had pivotal moments in which these things become clear, and we sometimes don't think about them until after the fact, which to me is also a parallel of the psychotherapeutic process. Like, you might not know everything about that moment, but it imprints on you in a particular way. And then you go backwards and you're like, oh shit, this is it. So for folks who haven't read the book, it just opens up with this scene of me on a panel at a conference that I go to every year. Probably not anymore, but now, so far up until that point, I go to every year. And the panel is called Talking About Palestine and Psychoanalysis. Like, this is not a revolutionary statement or anything like that, but it tells you something, because this is the first time in the history of that conference that had been going on for 40 plus years in which a title like that happened where Palestine was in the title. I was the only Arab and only woman on that panel. We were talking about settler closing. We weren't talking about light shit. We weren't just being like, hey, we were talking about settler colonialism. We were saying all the things that need to be said. Somebody talked about BDS. Somebody talked about settler colonialism. I was talking about the ways in which psychoanalysis sort of ideologically erases Palestine. And this man came in wearing and blocked the door. It was standing room only, blocked the door, the only door that was there. And remember, we're in the United States. This was in New York, and he was carrying a bag. So I'm like, this motherfucker has a gun, right? The fascinating thing, he also wore an Israeli flag t-shirt. and then warriored up in a kufi that was all Israeli flags. And then he flexed his biceps and cracked his knuckles looking right at me and started screaming, there's his genocidal bullshit. There's no such thing as Palestinians. Like, not just in psychoanalysis, like there is no such thing as Palestinians in the world. And Palestine has no place in psychoanalysis and all this sort of shit. What was really unbelievable was that folks didn't clock him, despite the fact his aggression was so palpable. I was taking notes and I fucking looked up. I was like, whoa, talk about a disturbance in the force. I was like, holy shit, what is happening here? And I clocked him. That's why I pulled out my phone, right? I was just like, I know something's going to happen, because I was primed to know something's going to happen, because I was thinking about how Zionism works. All my colleagues, all of them clinicians, all of them psychoanalysts who think they are so well positioned to offer analysis, had a real life example of an aggression happening. And instead of recognizing that as an aggression and coming together to eject that fucker, they reached to their theory to explain it. And that left me having to write to myself, don't let him colonize your mind. Don't let him disorient you. And I think that was part of it, is like, what is happening in me? This guy wasn't coming in just to assert his dumb. Of course, that was part of it. But it was also meant to derail any of us from our ability to think and remain connected to the fact that there is such a thing as Palestine that is inhabited by Palestinians, and that his presence is actually what is normative rather than the reality principle, which is the fact that his behavior was an extension of Zionist expansionism, arrogance, imperiousness, and expectation that you could just show up in every place and have your position be the one that's heard, and the position of anything else have to be the one that's arguing against it, right? So all these, it just felt like a scenario in which all the things I had been grappling with kind of come together, and the constitutive failures of the theory to do anything in real life. The colleagues just put what was happening in real time and put it back in their clinic. This wasn't a patient of theirs. Like, why the fuck are you reaching to your theory and clinical work? This guy's not a patient. He's an aggressor. He's right in front of you, which is what I ended up saying. I'm like, this is one of the ways that I practiced out loud, was saying, this is not an aberration. This is part of a Zionist playbook. This man is here to disrupt our ability to talk about Palestine. And so it was also a practice of that. Yeah, people are asking, did he just sit there? Yeah, he was there for the entire 2 hours screaming. And every time he screamed, I made an intervention rereading this as a function of Zionism. And everybody else around me was like, this is an enactment. This man has something else he wants to express. Maybe there's an unconscious, there's nothing but fucking unconscious about someone coming in with an Israeli shirt that he planned to wear and warring up in a kufi with Israeli flags. Like, that disconnect told me something much bigger. And I think that's why I chose to sort of start with that, because it feels like a really important framing about the misattunement of this psychological practice and method, not as an accident, but because it actually works hand in hand with the state to normalize and stabilize power and oppression.
And when you think about how everyone watched and then tried to analyze, but nobody actually did anything, right? Is that not so representative? It's like such a representation of real life, right? Like, all these things are happening. Everyone knows they're happening. It's very clear that they're all happening. And everyone's watching and waiting to figure out, like, well, what should we do? Like, just do something, right? Just do like something.
Yep.
Something.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and we know this, right? This is why people have like mutual aid sort of community protection, have bystander accountability shit, because we're primed not to do that stuff, right? But what's fascinating is I recently had a conversation on my podcast with my comrade and colleague Carter, and we were talking about this a little bit, and they said, they were on the panel with me, and they said, which they had never shared with me before, that they wanted to actually intervene, but they were a trainee. And so one of the things they found themselves thinking was, oh my God, I'm going to look like I'm crazy if I say anything. And these people, I'm beholden to them for things, and therefore I can't make this. That was the conflict that they were going through, which is what I end up talking about in the book.
I remember this.
Right?
Yes.
That's what I end up talking about in the book, is that a lot of the fear is actually not fear that we would think, like fear of confrontation with the cops or whatever the thing. It ends up being fear. I think somebody in the chat said decorum. That's a psychic intrusion. All the things we're disciplined into thinking, like somehow this is civilizational discourse, of course, like that we have to remain, calm, or like Jared, what you said about anger, that we can't express under any conditions. We can't express that because the infrastructure is already set up that even in appropriate moments where anger is the only response, there's an entire civilizational discourse and disciplinary and carceral infrastructure that's set up to make us look like we're the aggressor, right? And then we think that shit's real, so we stay away from it, rather than, like, again, what Fanon says is like, we're losers from the start. We got to get used to, or Brother Malcolm being like, be an extremist. Hold the fucking line, because they think you're an extremist anyway. Our mere presence there, the word Palestine was the extremist thing that made him think he needed to come in. So in what version of our mind thinking we could talk our way out of this, or soften ourselves, or say it in a way that's going to land on him? There was nothing that was going to land on this person. And that's the inversion, also making us believe like somehow there is a right way to do this that wasn't going to set him off. No, he's a settler aggressor. Everything's going to set him off that disrupts his worldview.
Facts. Jared Eyebrows putting in overtime on this talk. That's how I always know when things are going well. I just watch. So since Jared pointed out the moment that made him like, oh, I'm going to point out the moment. And I cannot remember if I text this to you or not. It's a little earlier than Jared.
You didn't.
So this is page 53. And you're talking about the whip. And when I tell you, so I had the PDF version. So as I'm reading, I'm like doing the highlights. I literally pulled out my notebook and wrote down like page 53, because I wanted to make sure that when I was ready to like go back, where I was going to go back to first. So on page 53, you say the internalization of the whip, a psychopolitical affective process, poignantly alerts us to how racism and racial violence could move away from the exclusivity, brute force on which it previously relied, into the assuredness of a carceral discipline of race and its social relations that emerged from within. And I read it to myself like 3 times. And then I started thinking about how often when you think about like, even like as a kid, right? You're getting a whipping, right? If you do something real, you know what I mean? Like that, it's like, and I have many moments with your book like this, but this was my first, open the notebook, write the page number down, and do not forget what you're thinking right now, because it is so important for people to understand how these physical and the imagery, how it all kind of pulls you back into this space of being afraid, of being worried about what your response could be, what the punishment's going to be, instead of remembering the one thing that I'm going to make a t-shirt, I got to figure it out. Liberation is the precondition.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, both of you. I mean, I feel it's so generous to share the parts of the book that animated something inside of you. And I think this is, Palestine factors heavy in the book, but one of the things that I was really careful about, and I wanted readers to know, is that I hope that this is a portable logic, that it's not, that it doesn't look like it's exclusive to Palestine. It is, because this is the world we live in right now. But certainly there are other things, the radical Black tradition and ICE death squads and all the things we live in right now. But to hear you both say that, you know, you took things and then you saw yourself in them or recognized it or sort of were able to read the logic that power follows. That's really, really important to me. So I'm leading with gratitude here. But yeah, this piece is, you know, this is from Saidiya Hartman for folks to say this idea of the internalization of the whip. And she's talking around the ways in which, you know, power could move away from actually using the whip. And when we say that, we can think about times of slavery, right, where you needed the whip to actually enforce power. And over time, you actually didn't need to rely on that crude element, even though we understand, and I do talk about this in the book, that the extension of not only the after effects, but the infrastructure of slavery and carcerality are still very much present. We don't have to look very far to see the ways in which Black folks are continue to be punished at a higher rate and in murderous ways, right? But the real key, psychically, was that the whip could be put away because you relied on the fact that people internalized that whip. That whip became part of the interior topography of people's world. And that means they disciplined themselves. And that means that the carcerality had been taken in whole and identified with the idea that somehow if I act in a certain way, I'm going to be able to not get the whip. Whereas what we're saying is like the entire structure is built like that there's no version of behavior that would, if the possibility of the whip is there, or the infrastructure was built with that whip actually, you know, cemented into it, which is the point, there's no version of action or pretzeling of ourselves that's going to get us around that, because that whip can be taken out at any fucking time, right? But it's meant to hide in plain sight. It's meant for us to believe that somehow it's our behavior that dictates whether or not that whip comes out. And it's just like, no, your walls are made of whips. That's the entire point. Like, it's constructed like that. But that internalization is key. And that's what I mean about the psychic piece. And of course, when you read these counterinsurgency manuals, or you read, you know, the way that Edward Bernays, Freud's nephew, used Freud's legacy to build his whole concept of propaganda, he specifically said that. He's like, look at this thing called the psyche. And here are all the ways to manipulate it, because we know there's a thing called the unconscious. We know how identifications work. We know that people invest affective power in symbols and beliefs. And here are the ways to make sure the dial is turned up on this, and therefore the dial is turned down on that. And you'd all, and just sort of inundate them with this messaging so they can't tap into this, right? And that's the sort of parallel in the room, is like, we were supposed to tap in. There was an entire infrastructure of the social order that meant we needed to tap into methods and social propriety and politesse, and not in real time. That's the internalization of the whip, right? And so there's so much for us. And that, I think that's the other bit where I'll end with this here, is that there's so much already available to us of people who have done this work for us, both in terms of thinking, theorizing, living like political prisoners and revolutionaries, that have given us language and analysis and have gifted us their experience around this. And the fact that we are pulled away from it is also part of the political project of power, is to have us forget, so that every moment is a new moment. That is so overwhelming. If every single moment in our struggle is a new moment where we have nothing and no one to rely on or pull from, we feel really small. And we feel like it's a done deal. And that's how power works. That's the story power tells about itself.
Jared, don't let me talk the whole time.
No, look, so on the one hand, I'm always happy to give room and let you run and do your thing and all of that. But this time I'm especially happy to let that happen, because I also know that whatever I don't get to say today, I get to say live and in person with Lara and Orasami at Red Emma's in Baltimore on June 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Oh, they put it up. I hadn't seen
They
it.
put it up.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I said, this is fly.
That's
this
a
looks
great
dope.
picture of you, Lara. Whew.
Thank you. And of them, look at them. They sent black and white photos. So I was like, I got to send one.
So I feel less stress. So I just wanted to share that. But also as people are noting in the chat, there's a lot. So I did try to order what I wanted to bring up today, just to stay a little bit focused. But I can't say enough about, again, just congratulations. It's just to restate that. And I really appreciate the work. You clearly, people will read it if they haven't already, and it's clear you know what you're talking about, and you've been putting in the work, but you've written it so it's very accessible. And then again, it has that vibe, and I'll just leave it there vaguely. Just, it has the vibe that I'm always, admittedly, it moves me the most. I love it. And that the bounce. So it's so again, thank you. I wanted to, and of the number of things, you referenced Orasami Burton, Dr. Burton, and Tip of the Spear, as everyone should. And I've said before that it's become my favorite book specifically on mass communications history. Never mind everything else I know that he's doing there. And I'm going to immediately add your book to my summer class and going forward, because I mean, not that I would need it, but you give so many overlaps to people who do communication studies stuff too, because there are so many overlaps. And one of them that I found in particular, because I also use the work of now the late Chris Simpson, The Science of Coercion, and now I can't find it, but there's a literal named reference that you point to, that, like, similar to what I've said about Burton's work. There's this overlap of what's being done in the 1950s in particular with the evolution of mass communications research as a field here in the United States, and this more broad psychological warfare evolution. And so if you, while I find this one name, can you tag, and I have my notes and everything, but could you talk a little bit about how you see media specifically, or communications playing a role specifically in this broader apparatus that you're describing of psychological warfare that is itself an imperial weapon?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for that. I mean, it's it's hand in hand. And our comrade Mtume Ghent, of course, talks about that, right? And Mtume is going to be on my show in a couple weeks, so make sure folks tune into that. But they can't not work together. And I think this was part of it. This is not a comprehensive overview of counterinsurgency or PSYOPs by any means, but I was really concerned and wanted to track the ways in which psychoanalysis particularly has always worked hand in hand with the state. And that meant it had to have a communications angle, and it had to have a media angle, because this is the way that things were disseminated. The most important thing that I found was this shift, like you said, in the 1950s. It doesn't mean that this was never done before. We know colonialism always had these sort of approaches to sort of make sure that the natives started to hate the militants and all these sorts of things. But what started to happen around the 1950s was a consolidated effort where an entire arm of the state, a coherent arm of the state, was made and sort of propagated and funded to do this full time. And what happened with that was they moved from thinking about psychological operations as only in times of war to what their words specifically, in times of peace. That it had to have, and that is where the media came in, is like, what are the ways in which we can subsume everything in this? Because if you're working in times of peace, like Renee was saying about the whip, you're not going to be sitting there saying, oh, we're in times of war. In times of war, it might be easier to exploit people's affect states, but what are the things we have to do in times of peace? That's the harder part. It's the harder part because that is what transforms something into normative process. That's what makes it mundane. That's what makes it ideology. That's what makes it hide in plain sight, so that we don't even notice that it's happening. That's why my call for psychic militancy is that at all times we should be aware that our psyche is contested space and that power is trying to make its way inward. And it's trying to make its way inward, if for nothing else, to make it easier to activate that shit when it needs it, right? Because in times of peace, you're just sort of sitting there building an infrastructure. It doesn't mean that every single time you're like activating these little robots that are about to fucking, you know, to come forward for you on your behalf. But it means that when things are needed, I can activate those identifications in particular ways or mobilize them so that we're not fighting the fight that we need to do, or we are disidentifying from those who do, because this is part of what I say in the book, is that every identification is a coerced disidentification. With every identification you have, you are being coerced out of another identification that actually might fulfill our liberatory ends. And that's on purpose. Media plays a central piece of that, right? And media can look like different ways, right? It can be, I know that you've had a lot of conversations with Sam about this, and Sam Youssef knows this better than anybody else about the ways that people are conscripted. Even people within these studios are conscripted to build certain things, use music, use affect, all these sorts of other ways. Or we can see pamphlets, like old school media shit. Zionists are still doing that shit, dropping pamphlets, making people believe that they're going to be bombed. I mean, in the case of the Zionist entity, if they tell you you're going to be bombed, you probably are, but you're going to be bombed anyway, with or without that pamphlet. But there's all these ways in which I suppose this is what I'm talking about when I say it's a political project. And that's why we have to think about our response to it as a political project. There's nothing unconscious about it. And the ways in which every single part of the infrastructure of social order is going to be used in this arsenal. So why wouldn't we think that media and communications and all of that to the contrary? It's one of the most direct ways that power can sort of make sure that we internalize the whip.
No, thank you very much. And that was another thing that I did admittedly personalize, because you do talk about pamphleteering as a method, and under Bill Clinton's directive during the dissolution of Yugoslavia, that was a job that I literally participated in at the very low level, of course, just pushing crates. And I remember my job used to be pushing the bombs that would go onto the planes that would be dropped onto people. But this time we were pushing crates of paperwork. And I asked, what is this paperwork? And they said, you don't have the clearance, you know, so like it's just push. But it was clearly that's what they were doing. And they were using this nuclear aircraft carrier to fly over people with pamphlets after the bombs and everything else. But just quickly, it was from your chapter 1 on the warfare psychologically waged, Dr. Paul Linebarger. He overlaps and is discussed in Simpson's book as happily talking about the psychological warfare that he advocated be used via the CIA to overthrow leadership in the Philippines, was the one example given in Simpson's book. And you're talking about him in the context of Burton's work and these world psyops conferences, which is wild to just read about or be reminded about, all to the point that from their perspective, and again, this is why I keep trying to argue, we don't have to get into an argument of impact. It's from, or whether or not we think it works on us. From their perspective, they're very clear. Media are meant to play this role. And your book is another perfect, discussion of that. So thanks.
Yeah. No, thank you. And yeah, believe them. They're very, I mean, when you read this speech that he gave, it's like you read it and the guy actually believes he's a good guy. Like, he's just like, this is the way, this is us. We're Americans. And just imagine, you know, warfare psychologically waged could replace the bomb. And
you talk about Wilbur Schramm in here in grad school. Like, these are the people we were being assigned to read. You mentioned one of his books in here. I had to read it in grad school. Yep. And I remember saying this to my professors. Like, we had arguments because I'm like, you see what they're saying, right?
Totally.
Because you're like, they think they're no, this is what we need. Propaganda we need to give them their public opinion for their good. And I'm like,
that's right. That's right.
And I'm like, you see what they're saying?
Exactly.
No, Jared, you're misinterpreting it. And I'm like,
yeah. Yeah, are you reading the same shit I'm reading? Because the other one is they call themselves Psy warriors. They actually say that, which for me, one of the hardest things about writing this book was not letting all my snark, and it does come out. You listen.
I was about to say, wait. You didn't let your snark out. What?
That was me holding back, Renee. But Jared, maybe that's the vibe you were talking about. There's so much snark, and it was lovely to be able to do that. And a shout out to Pluto that allowed me to write in this way. But this, you cannot but roll your eyes on this. If they weren't villains, truly, with the support of the most vicious empire in the world that is set out to plunder and kill people, and an entire infrastructure. Somebody in the chat said psychologists or clinicians are cops. They are arms of the state. Fanon called us agents of the state, which is another reason why I want to write this book. Is this is a commitment to me naming that and saying, if there's a field that I'm reared in, I have to, it's my ethical imperative to make it known to people that the role of psychologists has never been an innocent role. It has always worked hand in hand, which means there's a larger question of what do we need to do to disrupt that? What does it mean to be an ethical clinician? What does it mean for us to use and seize the means of psychology and psychoanalysis to wage part of the asymmetric warfare against these sorts of things, right? But to your point, Jared, they're very clear on this, calling themselves Psy warriors and saying that they prey on emotions like, despair and fear. And there is nothing mysterious about what they do. And they rely on the fact, somebody else said they feel like they're conspiracy theorists. They rely on the fact that we actually do our best not to do that. We act in good faith, particularly those of us who are engaged in struggles of liberation. They actually prey. They're predatory on those beliefs of ours. We were constantly engaged in a self-reflective process to make sure that we are not actually rushing to conclusions or having these large conspiracy theories. But it's not a conspiracy theory, it's power. And that's what they say right in front of us, is this is the way that power works. And they are very cold-hearted and calculated about this. They're just listen, Jay and I and Millennials Are Killing Capitalism, we're talking about this on Tuesday. If you haven't seen that episode, check out and certainly follow Millennials Are Killing Capitalism. But we read it and they're just very straight out. They're this has nothing to do with whether or not people like us. We just have to do this. And we have to do this because our longevity is far more important. And the longevity of empire and United States, whatever, in this case, what I'm writing about is primarily the United States catching up with other countries who had already had psychological operations, right? And for those who haven't read the book yet, guess which two countries had already an arm of the state dedicated to psyops before the empire of the settler colony of the United States caught up, and that was the UK and the settler state now known as Israel. And then the United States comes along and goes, oh shit, those guys are eating our breakfast. Let's catch up. And boy, did they ever catch up. Lynn Barger's dream. He was talking about a dream. He was doing his MLK moment at that speech, right? He was just this is my dream that we could use this. And a couple years later, they fucking actually were, because they were just we can't have other states beating us at this. This is the only thing the United States is good at. Let's be number one in murder. Let's be number one in the most cruel elements of life and sort of dictating how power infiltrates into people's internal worlds. And that's the basis of it.
Man, listen. So y'all know I'm so tied up in I'm so excited to have something physical that people can sit with and go back to. And someone asked in the chat, and I just want to say that Lara's coming to Jersey before she goes to Baltimore. So just saying, just because y'all got your pretty flyer done. As I work on trying to get the bookstore to answer my email so I can confirm that folks could go to Newark to get the book. But so there will, of course, be announcements once I have everything finalized. But Lara will be in New Jersey on June 25th. So I promise you all that if you are in this New York, New Jersey area, you will also be able to do this live. But one of the things I think for me, outside of like all these multiple stories. So one of the things that Lara does in the book is she brings in her actual practice and experiences as a psychoanalyst, like the things that her clients are saying to her as she's thinking through this process of how to help people maintain their psychic militancy. And there's multiple stories that are told within the book. And all of it is really in the attempt, and feel free, Lara, if I get any of this wrong, just say, no, stop, right? The attempt is really to get people to understand that these systems are daily. They're constantly putting upon you. They're constantly pressuring you. So this idea that we all have of, is it just me? Like, am I crazy? Like, is anyone else seeing what's happening right now? It's all intentional. I'm going to read a little excerpt because people need to understand that this is what you're trying to do. And it's a little long, but y'all will live. And
I also love hearing your voice read it, Renee. It's really special.
The only reason Lara's not reading this because I didn't tell her anything that I was going to do today, or I would have made her do it. So on page 80, and this is when I was like, yes, this is what we're getting. This is it. This is it. You say, attuning to this disciplining process is the consummate Fanonian practice of disalienation. To become aware of the ways that oppressive systems saturate our daily lives and commit to disrupting their ability to function in and through us with the antagonism needed to dismantle them materially and psychically. This combative practice of disalienation is not a color by numbers process, but rather an intellectual, effective, analytic, cognitive, and most importantly, political commitment and method. It is a practice of becoming disalienated, consciously aware of the ways in which psychic energy and processes are always under contention and are meant to become fields of manipulation by design. Girl. Sis!
Now listen, that's called my boy. You know nothing about that.
Sis, what? I get y'all, and this was me the whole book. I had to go to bed. I started reading it and I was like, oh my God, I have to go to bed. So I had to put it down.
I got that text.
And then at like 1 o'clock in the morning, like 2 days later, I'm texting Lara, like, I just finished it. I can't believe you wrote this book. You gotta be kidding me. Sis.
You're so that's so generous. I can't tell you. I'm blushing and people can't tell. I don't know what to fucking say, you know? But yeah, antagonism, combativeness. Like, this goes back to what Jared was saying. The vibe is this. We got to get serious about this shit. Because if their intention is to stay us, is to discipline us, is to engage all the carceral infrastructure to keep us in our place, is to make us feel small, is to make us believe that the history they want that ensures their futures, not ours, is already written, all that shit, it means we got to fight. We got to fight. But fighting means we have to know that our psyche being stolen is not a foregone conclusion. It's not. Right? And that is what I mean by political practice. It is a practice every single day to understand that power will try to intrude upon us. And I don't mean this nihilistically, which means so much to me that you all are reading the parts that have like fucking punch. Because it is not despairing. There is no part of this that is meant to say, hey, folks, this is a done deal. It's like, fuck no. Let's track this shit. Let's know what they're doing. Let's not let them settle within us, at least without a fight. And I'm not saying, I say this, I think at one point in the book where I'm like, it's not a new age manifestation out of material shit. People will say, Lara, okay, we have psychic militancy and people are still being bombed. You're absolutely right. But you know what? Psychic militancy means that every single day we get up and we commit to the fact that the conditions that create the possibility for bombing are not a foregone conclusion, and that shit's not right, and it doesn't have to be this way, right? That not everything is configured in the ways that it's always going to be, and that is the fight that we are gifted by people before us who struggled, and that's what we need to continue doing. If nothing else, and I use this word on purpose, psychic intrusions are meant to settle within us. And when they settle within us, they reconfigure the topography of our internal world, and they make us believe and feel things about ourselves, about the world, and about each other. And that's the process I'm talking about, is I'm not letting those motherfuckers have that terrain. If they've stolen enough, that's one of the things that I talk about with one of my patients, right? They've stolen enough. So like, nothing is a foregone conclusion. That's part of the political project they have. Our political project is a commitment. And that's the other thing where I'm saying is like, this shit's not easy. I think I mentioned this a lot in the book. This shit's not easy. It needs repetition. It needs each other. It needs relational process. It needs every single space needs to be disrupted because of that. But we also have to believe that it can be disrupted, right? And not believe their narrative, not believe the story that power tells. I referred to Leanne Simpson in this, and I thought that was such a profound, it stopped me in my tracks when I read that, when Leanne Simpson was just like, what if nobody sided with colonialism? And that can feel like a rhetorical question, but for me, that was like a provocation and a fucking challenge of like every single day. That's divestment, right? BDS, you say divestment. What does it mean to divest? To boycott something? I'm not saying it's easy because we're saturated by capitalism where like every two companies own everything. It's hard to boycott shit. But the harder part is divestment. What does it mean to take that seriously and go, what if nobody sided with colonialism at every turn? Which also means internally, psychically, what if we didn't side with colonialism? What would that mean? What are the demands on us? What is the shit we actually have to do? What are the commitments we need to wake up every fucking day and every fucking moment commit to? What does that mean for the reconfiguration of our world, our social space, social relations, political decisions? There's a lot there. But but there's a lot there because the story is not just for power to tell.
So much there. What you got next, Jared? Your turn.
Well, I did want to echo just quick.
Nice I'm being to you. You see.
I appreciate it. I did want to echo though that point though that it is very Fanonian of you to not only reference him but do as he was doing. You're practicing. You're doing clinical work. I mean, so in some ways I'll ask one of the questions that I had is you mentioned just a minute ago narrative, and you at one point make a comparison between, as I understood it, the grand narratives of the angry black, or sort of the twist on Two Blacks Black Rage, but the angry black and the passionate Arab, and so I wanted you to, if you could, to say a word or two about that, but I also would want you to say a word more, if you would, about your clinical work. For if to the extent obviously that you can, like, who are the patients that you talk a little bit about, the patients that come to you, the kinds of patients are that you see, patients coming out of struggle in particular, which I think I was very much interested in hearing more about. But yeah, so please.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for that question. Yeah, my clinical identity is actually a really important part of that, and I think for a while, maybe a decade ago, I was struggling with that because I was struggling to understand how every part of my life could be aligned in my politics. And part of the way that I was trained, and many of us who are trained, is to not be like Fanon, and where he goes, there is no separation between those two. I knew that viscerally. Every part of me knew that as a political being and as somebody who's committed to the politics of liberation. And yet at every turn I was told no. And to the contrary, to talk about infrastructure, an entire infrastructure that actually tells you if you are these things, you are not a competent therapist. You will harm your patients. Talk about an inversion, right? So for a long time, I was struggling with how do I practice if this is the decision I have to make, like give up. And this is where I will say Palestine helped me. Palestine helped me because there was no way I was going to give up the fight for the liberation of Palestine. And then, so I had a choice. I was just like, well, this is it. Like, I can't make this decision. And of course, for me, the fight for the liberation of Palestine is again, a portable logic for the fight against racism, against cis heteropatriarchy. Like, I already understood it like that. Fanon gifted me a language, a grammar. I call it a psychic grammar from the global South that told us about this, that, it unbendingly, unabashedly told us, go back to the structure, the condition that creates psychic suffering. So I had something to lean on, but my training didn't do that. But so I had to struggle really hard to be like, how do I align? And even though I had done this in different ways, I think about a decade ago, I was just like, there's no doing this half-ass. I have to be outwardly in my clinical work, as I am with everything else, unabashedly mark myself as an anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, anti-Zionist, anti-racist clinician and an anarchist. And I started to say that, like, that's who I am. And some of my colleagues were like, aren't you worried that people won't come and see you? And I'm like, they'll go see you. Like, there's a lot of you out there that think that you don't have to mark yourself or, because you're the norm. And there are many of you out there, but there are very few at the time. There are more of us now. There are very few that come out and say, this is exactly what I am. And when you do that, there's a different way you think about the fees. There's a different way about how you think about how you configure your clinical work, what you work on, what's available for you to work on, how you think creatively around supports, while also not giving up your own livelihood. Like these are the same questions we have in every space. When you are committed to a revolutionary politics, what does it mean to be able to live in dignity and not on the backs of other people? And this is also clinical work, thinking about it as labor, which we're also taught not to do that, right? We're taught to think about it as a helping profession, which number one, of course, is gendered in terms of labor, but also then disrupts you from thinking about organizing, like labor organizing around this shit, and access, and the ways in which larger structures like insurance makes it such that we can't organize in that way, right? And licensure, of course, is your trap into this, where your commitment is to the state rather than to the people that you work with. So if I'm a mandated reporter, the ways in which rigidly we think about that, rather than thinking about what does it mean actually to do no harm? What does it mean to not work with the cops? What does it mean to have a commitment to the people you see, not to the rules that are made for liability's sake, right? Those are all the questions that I had to contend with, and that I contend with all the time. And I have honest conversations with the people that come into practice with me about what that means and what kind of therapist I am. And we negotiate the space together in an ongoing way, because that can't be static either. A lot of people think about, oh, sign a consent form and that's consent. I'm like, that's fucking not consent. First of all, people in duress especially will sign shit. Of course they're going to sign shit, but how do you know what's going to emerge? And in the moment in which somebody is disclosing something to you, what's your responsibility to remind them of the limitations of whatever you can do in that space? Like, so the other thing about the clinical practice is ridding ourselves of the arrogance, the fucking arrogance. The through line in this whole book is the arrogant imperiousness of the field, that thinks it's so special that it needs to hide its expertise, that thinks it's so special that it can speak to everything and do everything, but in clinical space without any engagement with the material world. The arrogance that thinks that things change only in the 45 minutes per week that people see the patients. There's a fundamental, and that's why it's works hand in hand with the state. It's the same fucking imperiousness and colonial sort of tools that are used around that. So my clinical work is very much around that. Like you said, the people who end up seeing me are self-selecting. I love the people that I see. It is a life's honor to work alongside people and to be entrusted with their world. But more importantly, it's because we are aligned politically and politically aligned. And this is the book, are ways in which we do that. I think there are a lot of haters, of course, that come in and be like, you're intruding on their place and insisting on your political agenda. And I'm just like, yeah, you think your position of not speaking about the genocide is also not a political agenda? or you not having a position on trans kids not getting life-affirming healthcare is not a political agenda. So it's also not allowing that innocence, right? The valve of innocence that field and power relies on to enact its violence. That innocence is a central piece of that. To the contrary, we struggle together. My patients and I struggle together to make meaning out of the contradictions of this world and the contradictions of our relationship of being engaged in this way. There are limitations to what I can do that sometimes also are contradictory to the political commitments I have in the external world. But what are the ways we can struggle together in moments to make sense of that? I'm thinking about one of the examples I have of my Congolese patient, for example, who, we walk through that. And it's actually our political commitment together to understand what place her anger had, right? And our openness around that, and our openness around what it means, particularly for Black folks under surveillance and the scrutiny and the violence of the state, to be able to align with that openly, that I think allowed for the possibility of something to emerge. If up front I didn't make that known, I think it would have closed off something.
And there's some of us who might be saying, I might want some therapy, but I'm not trying to sit with some liberal somebody or worse. Like, I need to know, I need to have some sort of political purchase on your end too before I sit in here and empty myself.
Absolutely.
Real quick, can I ask one more thing? Because I've referenced you in a pre-recorded interview, and if I got this wrong, I can reach back out and tell them to take that out because I misrepresented her work. But we were having this. I was asked this question about voting, and they were saying, they said, doing this kind of, well, how do you respond to, when people blah, 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 if you don't vote for the two parties, you're doing this, that, and the third, you're ruining everything and all of that. And at one point in the back and forth, I literally held up your book and I said, she said the lesser of evil concept is psychological warfare.
There you go. You got it.
All right, then I don't have to call him back. I said, and I'll find the page, but you listed out on a set of things that they said.
Yes.
That they are saying, and I'm forgetting exactly who they are. You have it identified, but they said, here are the things we're going to do to these people to inhibit all potential radicalism. And one of them is the lesser, I think it's literally the lesser of evil.
Yeah, it's from the manual. It's from the field manual. It's from the psychological operations field manual in like 2022. By the way, it's the most recent version of it. It's not even the old school ones. It's like we present them with the lesser of two evils because they rely on, this is the thing, Jared, you picked it right up. In fact, all the manuals always mobilize the centrist position and say, this is our goal. This is our bread and butter. The centrist position is our bread and butter because these are the people that we can rely on to drag people over. And part of the reason why I use militancy on purpose is because it does take a militancy. And these operational manuals always say militants' minds won't be changed. They're too hard to get to. So instead, let's mobilize the centrists to make people doubt the militants, to make them hate them, to let's tell lies and stories. So in that section that you're talking about, if you see, the first part is like operational technical stuff, right? They're like kind of nice, like, oh, lesser of two evils, and let me talk about your values. And then the other version is, and if this doesn't work, let's use these enhanced techniques.
Right.
Let's threaten them with death.
And I'm sorry, it's just for folks to know, it's page 42, because we should memorize that for quick reference when we have these arguments that we're going to have coming up here again in a couple of months. Yep. As these midterms are supposed to save us from everything, right? That'll be the next thing. So, but I love it, and you're the glittering generalities.
That's their words.
I know. I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Look, you don't have to accept that it's working on you. I'm just saying that this is what they're saying.
That's right.
And then the appeals are directed towards such emotions as love of country and home and desire for peace, freedom, glory, and honor. Transference projects positive or negative qualities of a person, entity, object, or value to another. Least of evil insists that any other option will leave people worse off. Golly.
Right. You don't have to reach very far.
Yeah. Name calling, and on and on and on and on and on. I was just like, all right, so I don't have to make the call and say, take that part out.
No, you don't. You got it. All right. And I got to tell you, that part was so hard. Talk about snark, Renee. That I was just like, I got to report on this. I just got to report because they're so fucking cheesy. But that shit works. And it works because they're also persistent. And it works also because there's a gun behind it. It's like, if this doesn't work, then there's the threat. And that's again, the internalization of the whip. Like, this is not where it's going to end. And if you do, and that's why making us believe in the victory of the oppressor is such an insidious, evil fucking thing to do. Because number one, not only have they not won, like history hasn't been written yet. And we're meant to believe that it has and give up. But also, if you have all of this at your disposal, why are we sitting there thinking about their might? They've got everything at their disposal. And that's the thing is like, so what is our ability to engage in asymmetric warfare? I think is studying them, studying your enemy, knowing what they're using, knowing how outwardly they do that. This goes back to the question about the clinical work and neutrality, Jared, is that the field, especially psychoanalysis, is very invested in saying we are a neutral field and everything belongs in the clinic and we don't do anything. That's the public facing. But this is what I detail in the book, is like, as you're saying all this shit, look what you motherfuckers are working on and helping with these manuals. And back to the media piece, psychoanalysts are always asked to be consultants on shows all the time. They're consultants in corporations around marketing. They're consultants.
Ads, exactly.
That's the thing. You're right. Exactly. They're consultants right now on every anti-trans bill being passed in the United States, in Canada, in Australia. They're in the UK. There are psychoanalysts involved in that. There are a psychoanalytic team involved in advising Israelis in the IOF how to do genocide better. So like this shit of we're not engaged in politics and you need to be neutral is a fucking lie. It's always been a lie, right? They helped the Nazis. There was an entire movement of denazification of psychoanalysis for that reason. So from one genocide to the other, that is the through line here. And so we need to just like not believe this shit anymore.
Samantha, that's unnecessary trolling, Samantha. I don't appreciate that. That's shady right there.
I love you, Sam.
That was shady right there. Okay. It's on.
But listen, Lara, you say it in the book on page 30. You literally talk about this. What this reading intends for us to strategically miss is the vibrant example of how organizations, especially in the side professions, ideologically and politically collude with power. Not as a byproduct or symptom, but as a constitutive of their practice and theory. This is because collusion and complicity operate within a shared structural, systemic, and political tradition of white supremacy that emerges out of coloniality and settler colonialism. Literally your words. Jesus.
Now listen.
And on that page is B.F. Skinner.
Oh, yes.
The infamous.
Isn't that a great example? When I saw that, I was like, what the actually, I sent it to Ori. I was like, have you seen this shit? Did you know this shit? Like, this was the thing of like discovering this stuff, and like you live in it, and then you wonder, oh my God, this move away into behaviorism, particularly in the United States, like you can think about it from a economic perspective and sort of insurance and not wanting to pay for services. All of that is true. And then you discover all of these psychologists had grants with the Department of Defense and were paid. Now, we knew that their money was dirty. We always knew their money was dirty, and pharmaceuticals and all this sort of stuff, like big pharma. But that came later. This was in the 1950s. And then you wonder, oh, this is why B.F. Skinner has like 70 pages in Psychology 101 books. And he's shoved down your throat, right? You're like, this is the reason why.
Yep,
because
exactly.
He's sitting there building with another settler colony, the settler state, and training pigeons to track Palestinians. Like, this, you can't make this shit up.
You really
can't make shit up.
You really can't. And there's just so much. There's like on page 97, you say Palestinians are not struggling to survive Gaza. They are struggling to survive Israel. And I was like, say it again. Like,
that's Mary. Yeah, that's Mary Turfa's words.
Yes.
She's amazing.
And there's just your inclusion of other works. So I always feel really smart when I read a book and the book is referencing books that I've already read. It makes me feel really good. Right? And so like being like, oh, I read that. Like, and you do this, you really call to the forefront all of the other work that existed before you. And I think sometimes people don't credit this enough, right? They don't. And for as much as I tease Jared about the pettiness, I agree. It's important that people recognize that you're not the first person to think of something, right? That so much of what when we fight through things, it is literally bolstered by the knowledge that we have when we walk into the situation, right? Like, I might be just traveling with this book in my bag all the time so that I can like whip it out and remind myself of a thing that I was about to forget, you know? But could you talk a little bit about these strategic decisions? Because I don't think people understand. First of all, the book is like 150 pages. So like for all that you get from the book, it's not even a long, but I have no idea how you managed to do all of this in 150 pages, right? But can you talk about those decisions, how you did it? Because it's masterful. And I don't even know if you recognize how masterful it is what you did here.
Thank you so much. You're just so generous. I really appreciate it.
I told you before, I am not generous. I am honest.
It's still generous. It's still generous. And I really appreciate it. But I think that's part of what we're talking about is what does it mean to engage in that way, right? And live your politics out in that way. 150 pages, fucking discipline. Like, it's a practice of like, there's so much I could say, but I needed to be like, what am I actually trying to do here and for who, right? And there's so many notes that never made it in. Of course there are going to be. There are like chapters that didn't make it in because it was a constant process of like, what is the current moment and what do I need to meet in this current moment? And that was part of it. And that it was a book for comrades. I say it, I'm just like, I don't care if specialists read this. This is not for specialists. This is not for my, colleagues. There are many clinicians who I'm humbled are reading this and can see why and how it might help in their clinical world. But that was not the point of this book. That's what you had said before. I'm going to say it's a book for comrades. It is a book for comrades. It's a book for anybody struggling in this world to remember and remain attuned to material reality as we fight whatever fight we're fighting. and hopefully to recognize that the fight is a larger fight that's connected in different ways with nodes and sort of pressure points that might be specific to our location and our processes and whatever's happening in that moment, but that in the end, we're fighting the same putrid class of people that have all the levers and who are responsible for the plunder, extraction, and detonation of the entire world on the backs of the most vulnerable among us. That's a connected struggle. So, but yeah, I like the word that you use, the word strategic. It is strategic. I think there are some folks who might read this and go, but you forgot this person, you forgot this person, you forgot this person. I'm like, no, I didn't. Those fucking people have books upon books upon books. Those are the only people that are cited in other books. So there is a strategic way of, if you see my references about who is referenced, about who is uplifted, about who I reach to position and highlight that this is knowledge worth being disseminated, and that this knowledge is just as important. If I'm reached to my comrade Urmi Dutta, who talks about, epistemological subordination, is that there are modes of knowledge production and knowledge that have always been positioned as less than. So that there's a political intervention too, to be like, I'm not playing that fucking game. I'm not playing that game. I'll do what's scholarly responsible. I will and say, if for more information, read this shit, But the people that aren't footnotes, that make the center, the backbone of this book, are the people who we need to learn more from, and who have systematically been written out of the canon, out of scholarship, and not by accident, right? And this is why I think, again, it was really important for me to have political prisoners be at the heart of this, because for me, the question of what constitutes psychoanalysis and where does it happen, these are, age-long philosophical questions of the field. And what I have sort of really tried to say is that psychoanalysis happens in places that we are taught and disciplined out of seeing. That political prisoners have always known the centrality of the psyche, the social world, the internal world, and known that their oppressors actually function best in their misuse and abuse of power by targeting their mind. For me, that's an organic psychoanalyst. That's somebody who understands that desires, affect, the unconscious, identifications are always at play. That's the stuff of psychoanalysis. And for me, psychoanalysis as a European invention means that we also need to understand that any European invention is based on the plunder, extraction, and domination and exploitation of the global South and of Black, Indigenous, and brown bodies, period. That's without even talking about the fucking experiments that were happening. So if I'm going to make a political intervention, which this book is, I say this book is a political demand. It's a political intervention. I'm not shying away from that. That's not separate from scholarship. That's not like a secondary thing. That is central. What does it mean for us? Again, nobody sides with colonialism means everything we do is a political demand. This is one of those interventions. And so the strategy of who I'm pulling in, who are the people that have been central to me in my thinking process, who fortifies and animates my internal world, who allows me to remain focused, are all the people you see that are cited. And I don't think it's by chance that they're primarily people of and from the global South, or militants or revolutionaries that have helped solidify the way that I think about psychic militancy.
I mean, it's all.
Now listen, that's called my.
Again, I have to, going back to the not entirely a joke point I was making earlier about acknowledgments. Citations are political. I mean, it's just as political as everything else that goes is part of the process. So, I mean, you make the point on 13. I mean, you're saying it's no wonder that Fanon continues to be actively erased in psychoanalytic circles and training, or that now in his so-called renaissance in the Eurocentric imaginary, he is cynically intellectualized and retooled to justify liberal positions on the Zionist settlers' current genocide in Palestine. So it's either we only cite the accepted canon, or we cite those who are too large to omit entirely in ways that will make the money recognizable
Yes.
to actually read their work. So
that's right. And that was I just want to say, for pettiness, that footnote is about Adam Schatz's article. That fucking sham and shame of an article about Frantz Fanon.
Okay, and I did read that last year, right? Last year. Is that the one from, it was a while ago,
Yeah,
right?
I think so. You're like beginning towards the beginning of
yeah. And but I admittedly I was, so that's yeah. So projecting I was thinking of now I'm forgetting his name. Maybe that's good.
Oh, Lewis Gordon?
Lewis
Is that
Gordon.
Who we're talking about?
Exactly.
Yeah, fuck that motherfucker. He's nowhere near this, but yeah, him too. He's always been a Zionist.
That was the name I thought, because I saw him say some shit about Fanon would have condemned Hamas or some shit like that.
He said Fanon was a Zionist. He went that far.
Oh my God.
He went that far. Yeah. This is the preeminent Fanon scholar. Take notes, folks. Take notes.
Yeah, I love the clarity. I said the book is beautifully clear. I love it.
Thank you.
So I want to keep people excited, because I think they already had to do a rerun, right? They already had to do a reprint because your original printing is already sold out.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Which I gotta say is well deserved.
Yeah, I got 3 of them. I was like,
thank you. Now we know why.
Jared's gonna be hanging out on the corner, just handing out copies of your book.
No, more like you need a copy. It's like,
listen, it's a weapon in many ways, my brother.
So another thing that you hone in on very, very well, and that I think a lot of us, because we're so preconditioned to the idea that like this is just what it is, right? Like we just got to deal with the things as they come. They're just, whatever thing. And there's so many questions in the chat, so I want us to try to get to some of those. So this is going to be the last thing that I focus on for myself. And Jared, I don't know if you have anything else that you want to do, but this idea of the precondition of liberation, right, which you also got from Fanon, and that for me is something that I literally practice all the time, right? And when Lara and I first started talking, one of the big jokes was my Israel is a settler colony sweatshirt, right? And how I literally, like, I go to the grocery store in the sweatshirt. Like, sometimes I don't even remember that I'm wearing it, because I literally just throw it on, not really thinking too much about what the shirt says. And I also have a shirt that says Palestine, Palestine, and it has the outline, right? And someone stopped me in the dairy section at the supermarket the other day to thank me for wearing my Palestine sweatshirt. And he said to me, I think sometimes people just need to be reminded. And I thank you for reminding them. And I almost cried in the dairy section, because it's not why I wear it, but it reminds me why it's important that I wear it, if that makes any sense. But on page 104, you're talking about this precondition of liberation and why it's so important to not forget. And you quote Fanon, and then you say, that is, nothing short of meeting the precondition should satisfy us, and no compromises, psychically or otherwise, should be made until this goal is achieved. This is the essence of psychic militancy. It is how we remain in alignment with our revolutionary goals despite psychic intrusions. It is how we remain willfully conscious of the expansionist project of power, aware that the reach into our interiority is in service of a domination that cannot be complete without theft of the psychic terrain as well. And I saved this to be the last thing that I read to you, because, and there's so much more, Like your whole conversation with your client about being silent and the Black woman. Whoo, Lord, right? But the importance of reminding ourselves that we should not compromise on that psychic terrain, because the minute you compromise on the psychic terrain, they win. And you have to continuously reinforce yourself in the ability to continue to fight, to hold on to your own psychic terrain, and to remain connected to the reality of the situations in which you're clear on the reality, but they want you to think that you don't know what you're talking about, right? I mean, and I know you keep saying, like, I can't even tell you how much this book meant to me as I read it. And I really hope that others, as they read it, get that same, like I had like chill bumps, right? Like I can't even explain it to you. And I am so proud to call you my sister. I'm so excited that I can text you and be like, what about, did you see this thing? Like all of these things create spaces for us to continue to work with each other, to remind each other of the importance of that terrain, right? To hold on to each other when people are trying to convince us that we're crazy. And someone in the chat was like, well, how do we practice it? You practice it by doing it, right? You practice it by the minute something happens that makes you think, wait, was that me? You point it out to other people and say, they almost got me. So just know this is coming, right? Like, don't forget that this part is what they want you to think about. They want you to be distracted by it. And you say exhaustion is never neutral. And what I tell you, I was like, whew, the words, because it's not. Whenever you feel tired, it's intentional. It's because they wanted you to feel tired. They want you to give up. They want you to forget, like, that you're supposed to keep fighting. And I can't, girl. I've been waiting for us to do this show so that I could say it to you this way.
I love you so much. And I gotta say, you got discipline, because Renee and I talk, and she didn't let out any of this shit out. Which I love. I love being surprised. I get to experience it in real time. That's what I mean about generosity. You might be a truth teller, and I know you to be a truth teller, but that's a generous gift to be able to hear it and that you're sharing it with other people. It means a lot to me. But yeah, fuck it. Where do I even start with this? Right? Oh, every single example in the book that I give, there are examples from patients who've given me their permission. By the way, they're de-identified, but they've given me permission to talk about them. There are examples from supervision. There are examples from organizing spaces. There are textual examples. I'll break down the Ghassan Kanafani interview. I thought, Jared, that might be of interest to you. About
it's on my list, actually. I mean, I literally have that as a talking point, because your discussion of Kanafani, who I'm admittedly all too late to, was in fact my note is Kanafani was dope.
Yeah,
that's what I was. But so yeah, but sorry, yeah.
No, that's the best thing to say about him. Yeah, he was dope. But this is the example of every example that I tried to use was one in which people remained in relation despite attempts to dislodge them from that. And I think this is the point of psychic intrusions, is not just to intrude on our space, it's to make us atomized subjects alone, suffering through, we're exhausted alone, we're fearful alone, and to cut off and sever those ties, those relational ties, is part of the way that power works. It makes us feel overwhelmed by ourselves, alone, only people who could be thinking like this. And it feels so rudimentary, but that is how it works. It works on these building blocks of separation, which of course is a white supremacist and colonial intervention as well, to separate people, to literally dismember them. Nadira Sharhoub-Kavrikyan talks about this, right? But that's the point, Renee. So like, to be able to pick up on these spaces and be like, and then remain in relation. How do we practice this? That is the commitment of, it's not to shame us when we feel this way. One of the things I try to say so much in this book is this is not for us to collapse into shame. In fact, when we are engaged in the struggle, this shit's going to come harder at us because it's the people that are committed. Remember the counterinsurgency manuals, militants, right, will get the worst of this because they cannot be changed. So in the midst of wrenching ourselves, this is Fanonian desalienation. In the moment we wrench ourselves from the identifications of power that are meant to seamlessly hide and make us forget we are making a political choice to identify, that's the moment we're going to feel the crush of this. And that's the moment that the crush will seduce us into becoming atomized subjects and believe in the myth of individualism. That's when we need to be in relation the most. And being in relation means who are your people to do this with, to think out loud, not to be derailed by shame as well, but to understand that power is going to mobilize affect states. And I'm not saying, I've said this before in other interviews, I'm not saying that these affect states don't exist in and of themselves. We all have emotions. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that we have to be aware because they tell us. They tell us this. That's what Jared was saying. That these emotions, like you said, exhaustion is never neutral because Psi warriors know that these emotion states can be exploited in particular moments and they get mobilized in that way. So any moment we are feeling despair, fear, confusion is to check in with ourselves about where does power function in that and to what end and what is it trying to stabilize at the expense of what and who, right? Those are the questions that this is why it's a practice. It's a muscle to flex. It's one that hopefully will inoculate us and allow us to build barricades at the very least of like, I'm not going to let this intrude without antagonism. That doesn't mean it won't happen. That's Renee, that's what you're saying, like the moments where inevitably it's going to happen is not a failure. Us thinking that these moments where we succumb to this are individual failures of ours is one other way this political project works, is to think about the way in which if the terrain is so large and is under constant barrage, there are going to be channels through which this lands on us. I call it the psychopolitical affective terrain, right? There's the psychological and the affective, and I add politico to what Fanon called psychoaffective to remind us that it is a political project that it lands in that way. It's not an innocent, not just, oops, it happened, I used the psychological and the affective. It's like, no, there's a political currency to using these things you have inside of you against yourself. And that's where it comes back to liberation is the precondition, right? And this is why I open up the chapter on psychic militancy with that. This piece blew me away. In 2019, we were gifted Fanon's clinical papers. They were finally translated. So we have his books, right? Wretched of the Earth, The Dying Colonialism, Black Skin, White Mask, among others. But we didn't have his clinical papers. And in 2019, there's this massive fucking book that's like this big, and it's all his clinical papers. And what they also include are his political speeches. And this is a speech he did in Ghana, right? I think in 1956. And he says, once again, the reason for the precondition, and he explains that all of the naysayers that were asking the FLN to make compromises under the guise of reason. We've heard this before. This is what Jared was saying about the lesser of two evils. That's the argument that people were saying. And even supporters of the FLN were saying this. And what Fanon says was fuck no. There is no compromise to be made because we need to stay rooted in that liberation is the precondition. Liberation is the starting point, not the after effect, not what we negotiate ourselves to, not what we compromise over. It is the non-negotiable starting point. And that's the psychic position I invite people to take. What would it, in the same way that Leanne Simpson says, what would it mean if we didn't side with colonialism? In the same way that Brother Malcolm X says, be an extremist and don't be ashamed of it. In the same way that Walid Daqqa remains fortified under the barbed wire. In the same way that Ghassan Kanafani remains connected to the important political project of the liberation fight that he and his comrades were engaged in, despite the fact that he knew he would be seen as a recalcitrant thug, right? A revolutionary gun toter, which is how he ended up being reduced to. the liberation as a precondition says those things are going to be said about us anyway, because the structure and the infrastructure makes it such that we are the extremists despite the fact that we're up against the most extreme conditions that should never have come into being. It is actually the condition that births the revolutionary and the militant to begin with. Don't get that wrong. That's what the precondition is liberation is about, is always recognizing and being rooted in the actual material reality of the condition that created the necessity to fight in this way.
And can I just, sorry.
Go for it.
Because I was struck by that as you're describing how the Zionist entity had defined Kanafani, it didn't stop them from also killing his 17-year-old niece, who was not similarly defined, at least officially. So at the end of the
exactly,
I'll just leave it there. That's it. That was it.
You're exactly right, and that's the thing. And these are the seductions and gymnastics we're pulled into. Like somehow softening his position is going to be the thing that saves his niece. I hope that after almost 3 years of a genocide, we know that shit is a lie. But also the invitation is also to revise every belief we had in the lie that we were coerced into believing, because this genocide in Palestine is not the first genocide that we were seduced into believing these lies. The genocidal warfare against indigenous people of Turtle Island continues, of our Maori siblings in so-called New Zealand, in Aboriginal peoples in so-called Australia, in Kashmir, anywhere we're looking. It's like they rely on us to believe the lie that colonialism had to happen and that there's any nice version of it. And that's the position of like the precondition is liberation, because it's that precondition, Jared, that recognizes that no matter what version you get of me, you are still going to kill my niece, because my niece is a reminder to you, settler, colonizer, that you are not of this land. That's why you need to be eliminated. So it's also about truth telling about the conditions. And that's what Fanon gifts us, is like an unbending truth telling, which, by the way, is harder than we think, even when we're connected to it, even when we know. This was the whole, piece in the book when I talk about patients coming to me and saying, I feel like I'm crazy. And what was fascinating about that statement is that in the same breath they were saying, I feel like I'm crazy, they were also listing in excruciating detail every true material reality in front of their eyes. And yet they still felt crazy. We still are made to feel crazy, despite the fact that we can list off everything, right? Liberation as the precondition is also the precondition of psychic militancy. It's about us retaining that ability to tell the truth, no matter what power tries to tell us about that. Like, we know the conditions. People know their conditions,
Absolutely. Whew. All right, we're getting close to the end. So a couple of things. One, shout out to AWOLMAC316. Thank you for becoming
great choice. Great choice.
Decolonizing, it says, have a clear militant analysis first, though, then fight, or do both at the same time. And I think it's whatever direction hits you first. And you can, right? Like, if you're in a moment where you need to fight and your fight is bolstered by your clear militant analysis, great. If you walk into a space with your clear analysis and that allows you to fight, great. And if bore, all of it at the same time. But let me know
if the thug walks in the room and your analysis leaves you in your seat, it is not serving you. There we go.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yes.
Robert Brown, thank you for the $5 super sticker. Appreciate you. Poncho, shout out to Poncho, says, reminds me of the Christians. They believe they are righteous. How does evangelicalism support these psyops? And there's a long. We might have to bring you back for that one. I think that might need to be a whole look. Jared.
The CIA and the church, they love it. It's all wrapped up into that. Oh my God, a radical deconstruction of what was it? Charlotte's The Family. I would love to do some shit like that. That book, The Family, Jeff Charlotte.
Jeff Charlotte.
That like a real like, oh, anyway, yeah, I'm yeah.
Right, so we're gonna put a pin in that one, Poncho, but don't let us forget.
I need to study the particular. We all know this shit happens, but I need to like beef up on like how the mechanics of it, because I need to be a dork about it.
All right, Robert Brown also said, and I thought this was important to read, the psychological warfare is so deep that we need thousands like this sister to help decolonize our minds, dismantle the systems that oppress us. So Robert Brown is also very clear on the importance of a you and many yous.
All of
us. I'm not going to try and pronounce that one. And you talked about licensure, but is there a liberation therapist network that folks can tap into that you're aware of?
Yes. There is a network of, I'm trying to remember what the name is. I can send it to you and you can put it in the show notes. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but there is a larger network of folks who are like committed anti-Zionist, anti-imperialist, and there's an online form that you can sort of go into and tap in and this I'm speaking about the United States. There is a clinic also in the UK called the Red Clinic, and they do see people outside of the UK as well. The Red Clinic meaning communist clinic. So they, my comrades and I in the UK worked on that originally, and now there are awesome folks who took that up and are doing their thing. So you can see them online as well. And a lot of times folks will just reach out to me and say, hey, can you help me connect with somebody? And that's part of it, right? It's what I was saying to Jared, like, make sure your daughter hits me up. This is also part of it, is that we know each other. There's a large, swath of us across the world. And I do my best. I do get folks who reach out on Instagram and are like, can you find somebody for me? And I do my best to do that. Folks also reach out to me over email. And so we try to find folks for people who are committed, depending on what it is that you need. So there are many more of us than you think. And I think we're trying to do our best now. There's also a group that I actually did an event with on Thursday in Canada, but they're also online, called Therapists for Palestine. So you can see the ways in which the genocide in Palestine opened up possibilities for folks to start to rethink the way that we move through the world and how public we are about these positions. Because like Jared was saying, more and more folks are like, I need people who do this and who are able to meet the moment and who are politically committed in this way. So we're not unicorns, but sometimes it is.
But are you in network?
That's it. Well, exactly. That's the fuckery of it. No, most of us are not, because but we've found creative ways to meet needs irrespective. And the reason why I don't take insurance is, number one, insurance isn't fixing. The most vulnerable among us actually are not on insurance because they have to work part-time jobs that don't give them insurance, right? So there's a problem in us relying on that. The other side of it also is, what does it mean to also not be in relationship with insurance companies who demand information that I would never give anybody? And that's the reason why I don't take insurance, is the shit they ask us to fork over just to, ask for another session is nothing I would ever give a corporation to have information about the people that entrust me with their care. But by the way, ask your therapist to not do insurance, but they can give you a super bill. When they give you a super bill, you're allowed to get a portion of it from your insurance companies, and they can't ask for any information. So there are workarounds. We just got to be fucking creative about it.
I mean, and of course, now the questions are piling in. Y'all, we're not going to get to all these questions. just saying. I wanted to point this out because Dre, who also is like my guru for progressive inertia, that's where I got that term from. And someone answered him and said that was poetic. And I was like, what did he say that was poetic? And it is. So I feel like it's worth reading out loud, even though it has nothing to do with the question. But Dre said, you can't ask people willing to be monsters for nothing to be people for something. And Lord, say less, man, because whew.
And let me just echo that point Renee was just making, by the way. We can't get to all the questions, obviously, but wonderfully, Lara has her own show and is a regular guest on Millennials Are Killing Capitalism as well. So some of your comments or your concerns or questions may have already been addressed in the content already produced, and some forthcoming as well. So, and if you're in Baltimore on the 27th of June, come through Red Emma's, say what's up.
And if you're in New Jersey on the 25th, you can come out then also.
And if you're in Brooklyn on the 21st, or we're going to show up at the People's Forum on the 23rd.
There you go.
There you go.
Lord.
So we don't have to do every single thing.
So one last, and I'm only going to do this because I literally, the first time we were on the Zoom, I was like, girl, the hair, it is doing the things. Mommy wants your hair routine. Listen, Lara's hair has its own life. It does like it does its own thing. It's always, and it's beautiful. And you talk to me about letting it live in its natural state and recognizing the importance of your hair living in its natural state. And that's right. I love
and
that.
you mentioned it politicized in your book too.
Absolutely.
So,
yep.
Yeah.
One of the first things that you know, at 16, 17, making the decision to go natural in a world of white supremacy that demanded that straight hair was the way to do it. Just quickly, shout out to Pattern Beauty. I've tried everything under the sun, but Pattern Beauty does its thing. And a diffuser, which I never used to use, but now I do. There it is, folks.
I went natural too. No implants.
You got it.
No $30,000 trips to Turkey or wherever people are going for the, all them special, just no, just play it. No, it's dope.
Yep.
We should ignore. Yeah, my bad. I was going to get that.
No, go ahead. You do it.
Just shout out to ZZ Lion, the constant supporter of the platform and in these spaces. Saying I did not get the book. I appreciate the halftime speech. I need the episode on rewind with some hardcore beat in the background before I hit the field. No doubt. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Put a premiere instrumental set on and get the audio book. And I'm telling you, well, you could redo the interview, but get the audio book. I'm telling you, if oh my goodness, if I wasn't so broken, I would be lifting the entire gym right now. I would just be, the whole place. The book is so dope, and that vibe. Just so get your instrumental on ZZ and hit the gym. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. The Comrades and Therapists for Palestine told me that it's coming out in July, the audiobook. I didn't know. They didn't tell me. But apparently it's coming out in July.
I already assigned my credit to it. It's I think it was July. It's either July 7th or July 9th. It's one of the two. It's actually like when you open on the audiobook, it says pre-order now. I was like, ding, hit. So
although I admit I kept hearing the Pharaoh Munch for the Simon Says instrumental. Wah, 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 wah. Get the fuck up.
I love it. Oh my gosh, my heart is so happy. That's exactly right.
And then the back pain kicked in and I was like, let me sit back down. But it was there. It was there.
Oh, Lara, you have buoyed me for the day. I am so excited that we got to do this right after the book was released. I am so happy that you got to be here. I'm so glad that I held my tongue and didn't give you any hints about the stuff that I was going to talk about, because I wanted you to be able to react, and it was everything that I dreamed of. For folks, Lara and I actually got to meet in person. She did a drive to come meet me in the middle. Like I was in the middle of Virginia on travel somewhere. And she was like, I can come to that place. And I got to hug her and we got to sit and have coffee and chat. And her spirit is as beautiful as you would expect it to be. So I truly appreciate you. I appreciate you so much. And of course, we got one more. Do you want to do the last Do you have time, Lara? Do you have time, Jared, since someone made the effort to put in the super chat to ask the question?
Yeah. Oh, fuck yeah.
Thank you, 205
Shout out.
Keontae. My question for Lara is, how much of your work with psychic militancy does the work of Sylvia Wynter correlate to it? Specifically, the idea of psychic intrusions and Winter's work around non-human.
Yeah. I mean, the construction of who's a human. Absolutely. Thank you. And you hit the nail on the head. And she's in the book, right, about like the construction of the human, and whose falls outside of that is related to an entire social, political infrastructure that we internalize, and that is reproduced. I think actually this is Jared. I didn't get to this question that you had around like, the passionate Arab and the rageful Black person. It's the same shit. It's what's able to be mobilized. The civilizational discourse that is able to be mobilized to discipline us in particular moments and put us in our place is related to Sylvia Wynter's idea about the, who constitutes human. And that's dictated by white supremacy and colonial codes of order and so on and so forth. So the psychic militancy is always knowing that shit's at play. There is no moment in which power is not trying to animate that against us, and it animates us against us because when it takes us offline in those ways, we can't be connected to the struggle and to our comrades in the struggle and to the certainty, folks, certainty that we will fucking win.
Man,
now listen.
I love you. I love you, my sister.
I love you. Thank you both so much. Really, what a delight. What a delight.
No doubt.
What a way to
Thank you for the book. Congratulations
Saturday.
on the work. And
Thank you.
Yeah, everybody make sure you get a copy, that you are watching Psychic Militancy and catching up with all the other interviews. And thank you. Yeah, definitely. To you, Lara, to Renee, to the undefeated chat. Peace as always, because ain't nobody around here doing nothing but fighting for it, as Fred Hampton used to encourage. So we will see you all next week, same time, with more Saturday with Renee.
Black Liberation Media is a collective of Black and African organizers, journalists, academics, and media personalities serving Black and African masses seeking to further grow in their understanding of themselves, their histories, and the African world through entertainment and news. Please continue to like, subscribe, and donate to the channel so we can further serve you and liberate our people. You can also go to blkliberationmedia.org, get some merchandise, and also become a Patreon member and a member from the YouTube. Please do what you can, share, and show your love as we will show ours for you. Black Liberation Media.